Hello, buenas tardes, buenas noches, buenos días. It is the Chancleta Generation Podcast. Hello, everyone. Glad to be back. I am Clemencia, and the founder of Moira Studio, and your host for today and for all of the episodes too. I run an advertising agency called Moira Studio, and that speaks to Latinos in the only way that they deserve to be spoken to, which is authentically and creatively. And with us today, super honored to have Dr. Laa Castillo-Page, and she is the Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer at the National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine. And in this role, she leads the development and implementation of an organization-wide diversity, equity, and inclusion strategy and set of programs. Prior to joining the academies, Dr. Castillo-Page served as a Senior Director for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at the Association of American Medical Colleges, AAMC, where she led a portfolio of work to advance learning and workplace environments focused on achieving an inclusive culture. She holds a PhD and a Master of Science in Educational Administration and Policy Studies, as well as a Master of Arts in Political Science from the State University of New York in Albany, and holds a Bachelor's in Political Science and Latin American Studies from Fordham University. Wow. What an impressive background.
Thank you.
I mean, you've been studying for a while with all those degrees.
Yeah. I know it was a long time ago, but it took a long time too. But it was all worth it. I wouldn't change it.
It looks, very, very impressive. And what better person to speak about diversity and inclusion in the science than you? We have found the expert here. So speaking of which, this topic has been really interesting to me. It has been coming in a lot of conversations, not just my internal conversations, but also in more national platforms, especially in the past 5 years, that science and engineering has come to the forefront in the form of COVID and climate change, and many other newsworthy events. And, the lack of doctors during COVID, the lack of nurses during, emergencies, just like a lot of these conversations have been happening. And also not just the lack of people, but also just the lack of diversity in them. So, how did you get into this kind of topic and in this kind of work? Because I assume that back when you were studying, this was not in the forefront of, people's minds in science.
Yeah. No, that's a great question. I'd like to start by saying that I'm a very proud native New Yorker, born and raised in New York City. I actually identify as New York Guajariqueña. I made my own phrase. I'm sure there are a few others out there.
I like that.
Yeah. So my dad came from Cuba and my mother came from Puerto Rico. And they met in New York City, and that's where they started, our family. I would say that, I was the first, like we still find many Latinos, first generation to go to college. And when I originally went to college, my intention was to be a veterinarian. I always loved animals. I had rabbits, and in an apartment in New York City, I had cats. I would find them in the streets, convince my parents to take them in. And so I thought I was going to be a vet. And so I go to college, my first year at Fordham. No one advised me not to take biology, chemistry, and physics in my first semester.
That's a lot.
That didn't go too well. It actually didn't go too bad when I think about it. I ended up with B's, but I thought I needed to have A's. And it was already, a subject that I was sort of wondering whether I could be successful in. I didn't have mentorship. I didn't see a lot of other women or girls studying STEM fields. Mm-hmm. And so I just thought, I don't know if this is going to work out for me. Well, it was during the biology class where I had a really good biology teacher, and she was talking about the AIDS epidemic. And when I went to college, AIDS was a big, a big issue, right? Not just in New York City, but throughout the country. And in addition to talking about the AIDS virus, she started to talk about the impact on communities. and the devastation we were seeing. And so I started to question, and I said to myself, well, what is that called? And I remember having a conversation with the professor and asking her, what is this called? And she said, you might want to take a sociology class. And so I took my first social science class, and that was it. I never looked back at STEM, or at least the natural sciences, or even considered engineering or any of those other STEM fields. But I felt that when I took my first social science class, I now was starting to understand what was happening in my community, and felt like I was acquiring the knowledge, right, to understand and to be able to explain what was happening, not just in my community, but in my family too.
Yeah.
And so that kind of then took a different course and became really interested and passionate about social sciences and social justice issues. And over time, it sort of morphed into more of my organizational work, because I think about diversity, equity, and inclusion work more around how do we make our organizations much more effective, right? How do we drive that diverse talent towards our mission to be more successful as organizations, right? And to have the impact that we want to have. And so that's how I started. So I always joke around and I say I didn't become a vet, but I have 4 dogs and a cat. So I kind of feel like one sometimes, or at least I pay the vet a lot. And so that's how I guess I kind of balance things out, my passion for animals and then, of course, my passion now for diversity, equity, and inclusion work.
Yeah, I mean, you said something really interesting, which was that, when you were first interested in the sciences, there was nobody that looked like you. There weren't that many women. And, I had that same experience too. I really loved my science class. I loved reading about, science and also animals and nature. I was really into it. I'm still really into it. And also like astronomy, like I loved reading about planets and all the stars and, all that stuff. I'm still super fascinated with it. But it did feel very intimidating because it was a very male dominated space and super competitive, it seemed to me. And so it just didn't feel like something that, I wanted to get into. It seemed like a little scary and hostile. And I feel like maybe, still kids feel that way, I really think that it's not about like, oh, well, you just need to like grow some thick skin and like suck it up and just get it done. Yeah. No, it's more like, the kids need help, and the kids need also some guidance, and not everyone has the guts or the thick skin to just like jump in head first into, somewhere that they feel it could be a hostile environment. So, what do you think that, what are the challenges that you think that those kids nowadays find along the way, or like what has been done, like any advances that we've had since I was in school, like 30 years ago, and also like what else do we need to do?
Yeah. Well, we've seen some progress, but I'll be honest with you, we still have a lot of work to do, right? And if we look at the 3 main disciplines that at least my organization focuses on, right, medicine, science, and engineering, I would say that medicine is by far doing the best. Right. And again, that's not saying, right, we still have a lot of work to do. You see, the next level, I think, science and then engineering, I would sort of rank them in that order. If we look at medicine, and I just a couple of years ago, I spent 16 years working at the Association of American Medical Colleges. So if you look at just medicine and the physician workforce, and we look specifically at Latinos, currently there are only 6% of our physician workforce is of Latina background.
Wow.
And if you look at faculty, right, in academic medicine, about 6% as well. And full professors, much less than that. There are about 100, I think it's about 155 U.S. MD granting medical schools. 9 of them, only 9 deans are Latino.
Wow.
Of the 155 medical schools, right? Yeah. And that's including the 4 medical schools we have in Puerto Rico.
Yeah, which is like, which kind of offsets the curve. Yes.
Yeah. So there is yet a lot of work to be done. And so if I think about sort of, what I saw with the students that I worked with and what I still see now and sort of my personal experience in this space, I think that, we need to continue to support these pathway programs, right? They're critically important to get us ready, right? You don't have to have, this huge, so many courses and experience in science. And people think that, oh, no, I can't possibly study medicine, or I can't possibly go into engineering because I don't have this background, right? But those pathway programs help us, right? They provide us the skills, the study skills, any information, all the skills that are necessary for us to be successful. So we have to continue those programs, and we have to start funding them earlier in the process, right? We can't wait till high school, right? We know that those programs, when we start at the elementary school level, they work, right? Yes. They do increase the diversity in the STEM workforce, but it takes time, right? It doesn't happen overnight. So we need those long-term investments. I think we also need to, we know that we also need to engage, in, at least with Latinos, the whole family, right? It's more than just encouraging that individual, right, that student, but also making sure that the parents, that the family understand what kind of long-term commitment, how do they support their students, their kids to be successful. And so we know that these successful programs also involve the parents, the family members. We're very family, community oriented, and it's important, right? It's not like I'm just going to make my decision and that's it, right? We sometimes rely on our family and our friends, right? For input and feedback.
I mean, for Latinos, it's like 100% of the time you get the family involved. It's like it's a family decision. And even, the parents make decisions for the kids of like what they're going to study. Like, you're going to be a doctor.
Whether you like it or not, right? Unfortunately, that can happen, right? And then we also need those mentors, right? We need the folks who have been successful in these STEM careers to be out there front and center, right? Telling their story, sharing what worked for them, supporting the next generation. So there are a lot of efforts to sort of, support that next generation of STEM workforce. It's a lot of work, and we need to tackle it from so many different angles. It's not just you, the individual, and like you said, just work really hard and you'll make it. Yes, you have to work really hard, but all of these other support mechanisms need to be put in place. And once you're in school studying one of these careers, right, the institutions also have to make sure they support their students to make sure that they're successful in graduating and, completing the work. So there are some successful models out there, and we just have to continue supporting those efforts.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I tell our clients all the time that it's like we can bring in, as many Latinos as you like, to your organization or to your school or whatever. But keeping them, it's the organization's and the school's job too. You have to build some sort of a journey for them in which they feel supported. It's like, you can bring them into an event or something, but if nobody looks like them, or there's nobody that, for example, for their family that speaks Spanish, for them, or that, it's feeling supportive, they're going to leave, or they're going to just, there's so many, it's already scary enough that, they're already like, with just one foot out the door and like, just like hanging by a thread on, whether they're gonna move forward with it or not. And, because they may be doing this for the first time in their whole family. They may be going to college for the first time.
You may not have those role models at home, right? Parents or, close friends or family, or even a healthcare professional, for example, that look like you, right? That could be a role model. But you're sometimes just kind of figuring out on your own. Sometimes when I think about my journey, I also feel like there were times where I would enter one stage of it, and it was like I was trying to find the switch on the wall, and where's the light? And then I figure that out, and then I go into the next dark room, and then the next one and the next one. And no one really there sort of helping me along the way. So I think it's also critically important to get those mentors and those sponsors early on in the process as well, right? And not just one mentor, right? You can't drain one person for everything. Different mentors, right?
Or it's like, let's pick the one person that is Latino, and they're going to be the diversity person. It's like,
That's right.
I didn't sign up for this.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's important also, and this is something that I've seen in other organizations and even just like in for-profit, companies. Oh, let me grab that person of color and make them the diversity chief, of whatever. And they're like, well, I'm not trained to do this at all. I may not want to because I'm still working through internal issues within myself about being the only diverse person in the company or in the department or whatever. I'm still working through my own fears and my own imposter syndrome or whatever. And now I have to, lead and guide the way for other people. That's scary. That's even scarier. So, it's a really important thing to, have something already established and also, hire people that are trained, like you are in this kind of initiatives, because it's not just like, you now are doing diversity, right?
Unfortunately, it started out that way, in many instances. I think now the field has become much more sophisticated, right? There are training programs, there are courses you can take, right? But I think, very early on, there was people who were really passionate about these areas who just kind of paved the way and figured it out. So I'm fortunate now to have, be surrounded by so many resources, right, that can help me with the work that I do, and so many other colleagues as well, right, that also have expertise in this space. Yeah. But it wasn't always like that.
No, I can imagine. And, the other thing that, is sad, and I'm sure that you are experiencing this, is the diversity and inclusion work has been under attack, and saying like, no, you need to pick the most qualified person. And it doesn't matter who. I just want to be equal with. Well, equal means that you just pick the right person and the person that is most qualified. But I love for you to speak a little bit about that, because like, to me, speaking about what we were saying, the lack of opportunities for younger people means that the most qualified people are not going to be diverse, because, we didn't start off on the right foot.
Yeah. Yeah. I always find that argument interesting, because it just doesn't make sense to me, right? Because when we really think about diversity, is really about everyone, right? And we know there are so many studies, right, that show us that when you have a diverse team, it outperforms a homogeneous team, right? We need people, especially when we're solving complex problems, which oftentimes we are, right, in STEM fields, right? You're really dealing with complicated things. Sometimes you're dealing with an issue that no one else has tackled, right? Or you're building upon the evidence that others have advanced. And so we know when you have a diverse team, when you have different perspectives, different skills, right, different backgrounds, different ways of seeing things, you get to a better outcome, right? We don't want to all be the same solving this problem, because we might solve it really, really quickly, but is it going to be the best solution or the best outcome, right? But when you have different people tackling it from very different perspectives, it may take a little bit longer, but you're going to have a much more rigorous process, and you're going to get to a better place. And so to me, that is what diversity is all about. It's not about not having people who don't have the skills. It's precisely the opposite, right? And there's just tons of evidence that just show that, right? That we need all those different ways of learning and knowing and seeing things, right, to tackle these complex issues.
Yeah, because it's not just about what you learn in school. That's academic knowledge, but also there's these skills that you grew up with. Like you said, that was a really interesting thing you said. The way that you learn and the way that you think.
Yep.
It's like, that is not something that you learn in school. You grew up with that, with the way that you learn, and like
that's right. And our different cultural backgrounds, all of that, right, all starts to all come together, right, and make us the unique individual that we are, and therefore the unique contributions that we could make to whatever work we do. And this is applicable across any field, not just in STEM, right? Mm-hmm. So it just never makes sense to me that diversity is something negative or not good. It really, we know that for organizations to be successful, it is it's critically important, right? And we know that. I mean, if you even look at it, just looking at one little, like gender diversity, we know that organizations, right, especially in the private sector, right, when they have gender diversity, especially in the leadership, they have just better outcomes, right? And that's just looking at one little piece of the puzzle, right? So diversity is broader. It's not just limited to race, ethnicity, or, people like to simplify it. It really is all of those different dimensions coming together. And when you see it in action within an inclusive environment, right? Because you also need the inclusive environment to leverage that diversity, right? Yeah. You see like the work, happen in much better processes and better outcomes.
Yeah, I mean, it's sad to think that, all of this is, coming out of fear, especially, in a place where it's so based on data and is so based on, repeating something like, you just said, like there are certain outcomes that are coming out and they are positive, but it's just like, no, we refuse to think that way. No, it's hard because it's, change is difficult for people. But at the same time, like I mentioned at the very beginning of this episode, there are some global wide issues that we are going to need the best people on. And that these are issues that our livelihood, our humanity depend on, like this planet, overheating the planet, things like that are just really, really important issues, and how we're going to survive in the next couple of 100 years. Right. And we're going to need the best minds on that. And it's not always who we think it is. Yep. And we need to do everything that we can.
Yep. No, it's interesting that you say that because that's exactly what we do at the National Academies. If you read up about the National Academies, you would learn that, the work that we do, right, is to provide independent, objective advice that informs policy, right, with the evidence, right, and that hopefully can spark progress and innovation, and amongst the, and we tackle, right, the most complex, challenging issues related to science, engineering, and medicine. And so this is why it's critically important, right, what we call volunteers, right, the people that we bring from academia, from different parts of, society to come in and create this advice, right, to go through this consensus building process. It's critically important that they bring those diverse perspectives and ideas and disciplines and backgrounds so that we can produce, the best advice possible, right? So we couldn't do our work without that, right? If everyone was exactly the same, we would not have good products, right? And so we thrive on that, right? And that's precisely the work that we do.
Yeah. Also, people from different parts of the world or different cultures can observe certain things that are maybe coming up that others may not have noticed. And
that's right.
And like all of this data is really important. And it's tough. It's tough because you feel like you're making some advances and then you're taking some steps backwards.
Up and down, right? That's just part of the work, right? Is that you're sometimes you're moving along really fast, and then sometimes you're kind of stopped, and sometimes you have to kind of redirect. Nothing's ever smooth and clear, right? Yeah. It's just part of the work.
Yeah. Well, I love to. We're in the middle of Women's Month, and we're working on another project in which we were talking with a couple of women, Latina women that were in medicine, as you mentioned, and one of them is actually like a physician, and she said that most Latina women stop at nursing school because of different reasons, and not that many make it all the way to becoming a doctor. And also, engineering is, if the numbers of women in engineering are small, I can't even imagine Latina women in engineering.
Yeah.
There are some notable ones, of course. There's a Colombian that works for NASA, but those are rare, occurrences. And so I wanted to sort of turn the conversation about, specifically Latina women, because they're super hardworking. They make the least amount of money. And I'm sure that there's some brilliant minds out there that have not had the chance to show, what they can do. And so, I love to hear, any initiatives that you guys are doing specifically for women, Latina women, and also any resources that Latina women can go to, or any kind of advice that they can get that you could give to them if they're interested in the sciences or engineering or medicine.
Yeah, no, that's great. Great question. There are, since I went through school, there are much more resources now for women in STEM. I think in the last, I would say, 5, maybe even 10 years, we have seen more very specific focus of looking at, these issues from an intersectional lens and looking at women of color, right? For example, here at the National Academies, just a couple of years ago, we launched a report looking at women of color in tech, right? And so we are seeing a lot of that focus, right? Just really knowing that there's this extra things that we need to consider when we're looking at women of color, and the research is growing in that space, right? I think it's important to have Latina role models, right? I always, everywhere I've worked and throughout my career, I've always looked for overall just other women of color, right, that I can connect with, that we can share, right, our experiences, that, where you can get trusted advice, just because you have these similar challenges, right? There's certain stereotypes that are expected of us, right? The imposter syndrome is very real, right? We often will doubt ourselves, not just because we are Latino, but also because we are women, right? Sometimes we're the youngest one in the room, right? Not for me anymore, but, I used to be there, right? And so we have all of these doubts, and gosh, we could be our worst enemy sometimes. And so if I think about sort of, I like to read authors that are Latino, right, to get that inspiration. I grew up reading Isabel Allende. I love the books by Juana Boldas on leadership, like Latino leadership. I really like to read about inclusive leadership because I think it connects a lot with our values in the Latino community, right, around you being your authentic self and being cognizant of bias and how others feel and putting yourself in other people's shoes and, to sort of understand their perspective, right? So I think, those inclusive leadership styles really, for me, connect really well with our Latino culture and values. And I often, when that imposter syndrome is so real, I think about the challenges that my parents face, right? If I think I have challenges, I think about my father who left Cuba in a man-made raft and was rescued by the Coast Guard near Miami, or he would have died.
Wow.
I think about my mother who left Puerto Rico at 17, all by herself, looking for new, different opportunities that she didn't feel she was going to have back home. Yeah. And so I think I think those are life and death situations.
Yes.
So my challenges, whatever, I can, so I see that big mountain in the middle. I'm like, am I going to climb it? Am I going to go around it? Am I going to build a hole under it? Those, to me, once you put things into perspective, and you have that mentorship, I think you can tackle anything, right? And there's so many resources out there. When in doubt, research it, learn about it, right? I didn't have all these advances then, right? I used to have to go to the library.
We didn't have the internet.
Yes, right? You can research anything, take the time to prepare yourself so that you know what you need and what areas you need to learn about, or what, you know yourself best. figure that out and create a plan, right? And surround yourself by people that are going to support you, who are positive, who bring that positive energy, because there are going to be ups and downs, right? It's not always going to be rosy and perfect, and you are going to question yourself.
Yeah.
So I don't know if I answered your question. I threw a whole lot of stuff in there.
Yeah, you totally did. I think one thing that I like to add is, for all the young Latinas out there, unfortunately, we still have to prepare more than others. We still are going to be judged more than others. So it's just setting expectations and saying, okay, yeah. They might hire the person next to me because the boss is a man and he likes to work with other men, and I may be more prepared than them, but it's this is the when you say like this is the mountain, am I gonna go around it, am I gonna die on this hill, is this the hill that I choose to die on? And it's like you gotta pick your battles. Sometimes it's like it's not fair, but it is what it is, but you just keep going, and having that network around you is so really important. And especially when you are not, when you're like the only person in the room that it's like you, and but just don't give up, right? They're not giving up, and also, I'm not saying suck it up and blah 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 blah. It's like, I feel like in this work, because I also experienced the same thing. I've been passed over for many, many different things, for either men or like, Anglo people or whatever, even though I was more qualified, or as an agency we were more qualified, whatever. And it's not like about just suck it up. It's more about like, well, this is the world that we live in. And at the same time, once I actually, if I ever make it, and once I do, I'm going to really fight for other people not to have to go through the same thing that I did. Yeah. And so it's sort of like we're in this, in this mission.
Yeah, I think we need to embrace, right? There was a time where I thought I needed to change myself, right, to fit in.
Yes.
And I don't know. I'm not doing that. I am who I am. I'm going to embrace my authentic self and my approach to leadership. I'm not going to be perfect. Not everyone is going to like it, but I can only be true to myself. And you can't fake it for long anyway, right? Even if you try to fake it, eventually, right, who you really are is going to show, right? So I think you have to, I think that when you are, as women of color and as Latinas, we have this ability to coexist in many different environments, right? We can come over here and, speak Spanish and connect with this community. We can then come over here and connect with this community. So I think embrace all of that, all of what makes you who you are, unique, your cultural background, your languages, right? Plural, your education, your training, your life experiences, where you grew up, all of those things, I think make you unique, and embrace that and bring that to the table, right? So I don't change who I am. This is who I am. I don't think I need to fit a certain, box. And some people may want to put me in that box, but this is who I am, right? I can only be who I am. And that's just a fight that I just don't want to have anymore.
I love that. I love that. And we also don't need to be like men. We don't need to imitate men.
No. Yeah.
We can embrace our female selves. We can embrace being nurturing. We can embrace being caring. And that doesn't make us weak. It just makes us women. And
unfortunately, many women who were successful decades ago, that was sort of what they had to do, right? They felt that they needed to sort of take on more what are male characteristics. I don't know what that is, because all of those things women have too.
Yes.
Right. But I think that was sort of, so I think those women have paved the way for us that we don't have to do that anymore. Mm-hmm. Right. We can bring I'm not saying it's going to be easy, still easy, but I think there's more of that move, right. To sort of be who you are. And then to find, right, there are areas that you have to become stronger in and improve, and that's fine. And then there are just things that are going to make you stronger because of who you are, right?
I love that.
What you bring to the table.
I love that. Thank you so much. That's all the time that we have for today.
That was fast.
I could talk about this for hours. I'm sure you can too. And you and me have been talking about this offline many times, and this is why we decided to do this episode. Hopefully it serves someone out there that is thinking about studying in sciences or tech or engineering, and if you need any resources, you can go to the organization where Dr. Castillo works and find some resources there. And there's some awesome programs for young people, some awesome initiatives for people of color. And so the work is being done. Let's get on it. Let's all work together to make it happen. Because it's gonna depend on all of us for this world to move forward. Every single one of us. So thank you so much, Dr. Castillo. This was amazing. What an honor, and what amazing knowledge and advice you've given us today. All right. Well, if you have any other questions, guys, you know where to find us. Chancleta Generation on Instagram and the TikToks, and then the X is just Chancleta Gen, because Ellen is a little moody like that. And if you like this podcast, share it with your friends, give us a like, give us a rating, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.